Fake news, even faker outrage, all that and more coming out of Michigan's appearance at Big Ten Media Days. We'll discuss it next on Michigan Podcast.
But there's going to be one team that's going to play solely as a team. No man is more important than the team. No coach is more important than the team. The team, the team, the team.
Looks deep for Anthony Carter. Waits for it, hit, caught.
This is no time for that. In the pocket and a sack. Tim Jamison. Brady gets terrific.
Throws it, and a touchdown, Knight again. Schultz just before Brazil got him, and a leaping interception by Woodson.
Harbaugh back to throw over the middle, caught by Collier at the 5 on his feet, touchdown Michigan. On its way. It's good.
He's 5'7", 179 pounds, a junior at Michigan. But Jamie Morris packs a wallop, and he delivers for Bo Schembechler.
And here's your first play. Pressure coming, sack. It is Glenn Steele, number 81, who fought his way through the traffic.
Option. And Robinson calls his own number, and he's going to score. Oh, an easy touchdown for Robinson and Michigan.
Win it. We're going to win the championship again because we're going to play as a team. And when we play as a team and the old season is over, you and I know it's going to be Michigan again. Michigan.
Go Blue, I'm Steve Deace. Welcome to this week's episode of Michigan Podcast. My partner at Wolverine Digest and good friend Michael Spath from WTKA in Ann Arbor. He'll be joining us later on, and we'll be talking about the football-specific news items that were revealed to us at Big Ten Football Media Days last week in Chicago. But I want to begin with what has been most of the focus. And I'm here to tell you, it's all fake. You ever seen the movie I'm Gonna Get You, Sucker? Classic movie, by the way, if you've never seen it. There's a woman in that movie, Cherry Girl, right? And then when he finally has his chance with her, she gives him some bad news. These aren't my real lips. These aren't my real breasts. These aren't my real eyebrows. She just starts removing body parts. See, the whole thing was fake. It was a mirage. She wasn't real. And that's a good metaphor for much of what went on surrounding the Michigan football program, particularly Coach Harbaugh at Big Ten Football Media Days last week. It was fake news, even faker outrage. And, you know, we have been critical of what's happened at times here on this show. It's not like Jim Harbaugh hasn't provided you with real content. You know, you could talk about being 1-9 against top 10 teams. I know this is not necessarily the place where we'd like to go to feed you the bad stuff, but, you know, it's all true. He's 1-9 against top 10 teams, 0-4 against Ohio State. He's finished above third place in his division once. Okay, I mean, you could point all those things out. No Big Ten championships, no division titles, still hasn't been to Indianapolis. All of those things are true. That's ample material for folks to discuss in my line of work, in my industry, the media. But instead, well, that's just the true bad stuff isn't good enough. We've got to make up new bad stuff. And then of course, after we do this, we're going to wonder, why don't people trust us and like us? Why do we poll worse than lawyers and cockroaches? But I repeat myself. Why does this happen? It truly is. It's a mind scrambler. It's a mystery. I don't know how we could ever fathom. It's a riddle wrapped around an enigma. How did this happen to us? Let's begin with the controversial comments Jim Harbaugh made about Urban Meyer. When asked, as a guest on another man's podcast, here's what he said. Urban Meyer is a really good football coach with a phenomenal record. And controversy has followed him wherever he's gone. This news to you. You weren't aware of this. Really? You weren't aware that Urban Meyer is a really good football coach and left Florida in the wake of 31 player arrests and would still be the coach at Ohio State right now if it weren't for the name Zach Smith. This is breaking news to you. Sun hot, earth round. No, that part is breaking news to some of you, apparently. You weren't aware that this was unknown. Because a lot of people that work in my line of work in the media were just, pearls clutched, virtues signaled. They couldn't believe it. They were aghast. They couldn't believe it. Urban Meyer's had problems off the field. Who knew? Well, a year ago at this time, apparently all of you did. You must have just forgot or something. And then you have Teddy Greenstein from the Chicago Tribune gets up there and says, Coach, do you feel like you need to clarify those comments? And Harbaugh's like, clarify what? You guys didn't cover those stories? I didn't know that Zach Smith turned the Woody Hayes football complex into a stage for his amateur porn. You guys told me. I didn't know. I didn't know that Zach Smith was, going all 50 shades of gray and turned the Woody Hayes football complex into a drop-off depot for sex toy corporations. You guys told us that. I don't know. I didn't know about all the restraining orders and arrests. You guys reported on all of that. Why is this shocking news? The level of disingenuous hypocrisy there is pathetic. If you're good at fake news, please, can we do better? Do better than that. Lie about stuff that we don't have YouTube video of. Last year! Why don't they watch us? Why don't they read us? Why don't they listen to us? How come they don't trust us? Indeed, it's a mystery. And then there was the Harbaugh doesn't care about mental health angle. So an interview with Sirius XM, Coach Harbaugh sitting down with A.J. Hawk and John Jansen, one from Ohio State, one from Michigan, to talk about his team. And all afternoon long, Harbaugh became the first, as far as I know, high-profile coach in college football to advocate for players to get immediate eligibility, no questions asked, if they wish to leave a school. And that apparently turned into oppression. Giving people freedom is now a statement of oppressiveness. One of the things that he said was, we're putting kids in a situation where if they get the right lawyer, tell the right lie, if their coach say the right thing, they get a waiver. Let's just remove all of that. You don't want people lying about stuff, making stuff up, claiming they're depressed or what have you. And then after saying that, he came back and said, most of you missed this. It wasn't included in a lot of the transcripts that were shared by the reporters. They forgot to point out that he came back a couple of minutes later and said, by the way, I want to make sure everybody understands. I'm making a broader point here about transfer rules. We take mental health seriously at the University of Michigan. Save your cards and letters. This wasn't about that as a topic. I was just, providing examples of the places we put young people in to just get the same freedoms most Americans have to freely go where they want and associate with whom they choose. But no, that turned into a 3-day cavalcade of ass clownery that never ended. And props to Coach for never apologizing, never taking it seriously, refusing to genuflect on any level because it wouldn't have mattered. If he would have done that, out of the first 1,000 tweets, 997 of them would have been, well, you're only doing this because we're getting blown up in the media and your own Thor against Ohio State. That's all they would have done. All right. And so speaking of Twitter, a couple of things on that. Number one, 80% of Twitter accounts are from outside of the United States. 80%. America is not Twitter. I told a good friend of mine this story who was really concerned about this story. It's going to go away in a day. He didn't think it was possible. It went away. I was wrong. It went away in half a day. All right. This was all fake. It had no one. You know what this is about? This is about, I need a mark of low-lying fruit with high name ID that I can successfully generate clicks off of. That's what this was about. This whole story, all these stories were fake. What's not fake is the 1-9 against top 10 teams and 0-4 against Ohio State. I wish that were fake, but it's not. None of that's not fake, but let's not talk about that. Let's discuss the fake instead. All of this was fake. All of the news around it was fake. All of the outrage around it, even faker. Don't believe any of it. None of it was true. And the next time I complain that Coach Harbaugh doesn't want to talk to the media, doesn't want to be more forthcoming, doesn't want to give us more information and be more honest and transparent about what he's really thinking. The next time I say that, kick me with a steel-toed boot hard as you can right in the shins, because I totally understand it now. In fact, I don't know why coaches or people, there's just a lot of terrible in my line of work, a lot of people that really don't have any interest whatsoever in getting to any kind of truth or version of it. It's just simply a means to an end. It's Don Henley's dirty laundry played out in even faster real time, courtesy of social media. So if you were a Michigan fan and you were concerned about any of this, I listened to one woman called WTKA in Ann Arbor and say, I don't know how Harbaugh's going to get out of this. Get out of what? This is nothing. It never was anything. None of this was ever true. All fake news, even faker outrage. Now that football season is here, it's a great time to support Michigan Podcast via Patreon. We'd love to get over 100 patrons on Patreon by the time the season kicks off on August the 31st. And there's 3 ways that you can support us on Patreon. If you pledge $1 a month, that's just a great way, if you like our content, just to say thank you for putting this together for you all across the maize and blue landscape all year long. If you are in our exclusive club for $5 or more per month, then you get exclusive content. Like you can see, I recently posted my bestest bets for the college football season win totals in 2019. We will also have exclusive instant reaction podcast after games and other content that we set aside, like my point spread picks and others that we do for those of you that are supporting us at $5 a month. And then if you'd like to join our booster club, that's $25 or more a month. You also get your name and business mentioned in the credits, a shout out in the show as well. So a way to promote any message that you have, with some standards around here, obviously, or a business that you'd like us to promote for you as well, for just being a booster for $25 or more per month. And thank you to all of you that have been supporting us all year long as we head into our 3rd season on Michigan Podcast. And now let's get to the football-related news that came out of Big Ten football media days, specifically as it pertains to the Wolverines. Joining us to talk about that, our buddy Michael Spath from WTKA in Ann Arbor and WolverineDigest.com. Michael, good to have you back with us here on Michigan Podcast. How are you, man?
I'm terrific. The start of Big Ten media days is the kind of like that summer point where you start to feel football getting closer and closer pretty soon. NFL training camps will open, and then late next week, Michigan football camps will open. So it's awesome, man. It's coming. Can't wait. Still trying to enjoy a little bit of summer, but certainly when football season gets here, we'll all be ready for it.
Absolutely ready for it. So let's get to it. The big football-related news, I thought, had to do with Harbaugh talking about playing both quarterbacks this fall. Mm-hmm. Before we get into what it may or may not look like, let's tackle the big picture issue here. We're living in an era right now, particularly when it comes to quarterbacks. If I ain't starting, I'm departing, right? And Michigan might have as loaded of a quarterback room as there is in college football right now. So how much of this is I can't have Dylan McCaffrey transferring on me? How much of this is I need to send a signal to, all of the guys in that QB room that, we take the competition seriously. We don't just anoint guys because, we just went through a season here at Michigan a couple of years ago where the quarterback room, unfortunately, wasn't empty. There was just too many guys in there that couldn't play. So how much of this is coach speak given the environment that we are in, Michael, do you think?
I think this is a potentially brilliant move, both on the field and in that quarterback room by Jim Harbaugh and his staff. On the field, let's talk about that. You have two quarterbacks in Shea Patterson and Dylan McCaffrey that do a lot of the things similarly, have a lot of the same things that they do, but then are slightly better at some things too. Shea Patterson is experienced. He throws a really good deep ball. He's been through all the battles. He knows how to run this offense. We've seen him when he's out of the pocket, his improvisational skills, how good he is. He's your guy. But what he doesn't do super well is he's not a great read option quarterback. And in today's college football, with the exception of, say, Trevor Lawrence at Clemson and a couple of places here and there, if you're going to run the spread offense, you need to have a quarterback that can run a little bit of the read option. Shea Patterson can run a little bit of it. We saw it against Wisconsin, this long run, but most of the time we saw it in a third or fourth down situation. Northwestern and Michigan State come to mind, where he makes a move and he picks up a first down. He's decent at it, adequate at it, not great at it. Dylan McCaffrey, on the other hand, from everything we've seen from spring ball, from the times that he's been in there in game situations, is potentially dynamic as a read option runner. So if I've got these two guys who maybe Shea Patterson is an overall like an 8.5, but in there's certain moments in a game where I can utilize Dylan McCaffrey to get that extra 1.5 points to give me a 10 as a quarterback, I like it. I mean, this is honestly Jabril Peppers from 2016 when they had this incredible weapon, but they didn't know how to use him. I think they can use a guy properly in a situation where it can be an even more explosive offense. So that's the on-field result. Off the field, I don't think that this was a message to Dylan McCaffrey as much as maybe as you were kind of hinting at, because I don't think Dylan McCaffrey, with that family background, the fact that he's the backup, I don't think he was sitting there going, I'm taking off if I'm not the starting quarterback in 2019. He also recognizes I'm going to have 2 full years left in 2020 and 21 to be the guy. I think this is a message to Joe Milton.
Yeah.
I think this is a message to J.J. McCarthy. I think this is a message to the young kid that just committed that's in the 2028 class. Who's like in diapers right now. I mean, I think it's a message to all of those guys that we're going to experiment and we're going to do something unique here, and we're going to play 2 quarterbacks a year. So if you're Joe Milton, and maybe you're not the guy this year, you're the odd man out still, but next year that you don't need to necessarily win the starting job, because whether you win it or not, you're still going to play, you're still going to get an opportunity. And at some point, you're going to have a chance to potentially overtake the starter if you're not the opening day guy. I think that's who this message was sent to. And I think that gives quarterbacks out there, recruits out there, and Michigan has one pledge for 2020 and 2021, but it gives a reason for those guys to stick to their commitments because they're hot commodities, and they've got to be looking at Michigan's quarterback room going, it's loaded. How am I ever going to see the field?
Yeah, I agree with that, a lot of that. In fact, I kind of think, you know how much Jimmy likes Michigan football history, knows it, history in general. And, one of the things that Schembechler used to revitalize the Michigan program is he turned it into his own version of the program that Woody Hayes had that dominated so much at Ohio State. And so this offseason, you see Ohio State run Michigan off the field with a spread RPO attack. You see Michigan go to a variation of that this offseason. What also did Ohio State do last year to preserve Dwayne Haskins, who also wasn't a great runner? You saw Tate Martell come in a lot of red zone and goal line situations. Now, I think Dylan McCaffrey has shown just as good a running ability and far better throwing ability than we saw out of Tate Martell. I could see that being Dylan McCaffrey's every week role for certain, not counting the score or what's going on in a game, but where he is the guy that comes in and gives it, particularly in a confined space where you're going to have to be able to either run over people or juke them.
Agree.
And Shea is a good runner, but he's not really either one of those things, okay? And McCaffrey's a guy that can truck some people.
Yeah. Someone said to me, Steve, if you're putting Dylan McCaffrey in during the red zone opportunities, aren't you potentially really hurting your offense or hurting Shea Patterson's confidence. And I would say this: if you get to the red zone and Shea Patterson in the red zone, the offense scores a touchdown 70% of the time, but you put Dylan McCaffrey in the game and the offense scores a touchdown 80% of the time, which quarterback am I going to be inclined to use in the red zone? I'm going to use a guy that gives me a greater chance to score touchdowns. And I think Dylan McCaffrey could do that. Not saying he definitely will, because we don't know yet in terms of his decision-making, throwing the football in the red zone or in any situation. But if he can give you that true read option look for the defenses and keep them honest, I think that could be a huge win for Michigan.
Let's get some other news that came out of Big Ten football media days, Michael. Ambry Thomas, who was competing with Vincent Gray to be the corner opposite Lavert Hill, who's on several All-American teams this preseason after having an All-Big Ten season a year ago. Harbaugh said he is working through something. There's talk it's some kind of an illness, and he's lost a lot of weight. And he was already kind of rail thin to begin with. So they're concerned about him being at a healthy playing weight level heading into camp for the start of the season. First 2 weeks against Middle Tennessee, and then you have the triple option with Army. You probably don't need him, and then you have a bye. So, if you need a guy to put on another 10, 15 pounds or so, you really don't need him, do you? Until like September the 21st, and it's only July 23rd today. That's almost 2 full months you have to nurse him back to health. But what are you hearing there in Ann Arbor about Ambry Thomas?
Well, first of all, let's give credit to Chris Ballas and the Wolverine.com. I believe that they broke this story. They didn't get specific with the name, but they talked about this about 2 weeks ago. And so that was when we first heard some inklings about it. And it's, I'm about to say it's damaging, but I don't really know, because I don't really know what Ambry Thomas was going to be this year. I don't think any Michigan fan knows what Ambry Thomas is going to be this year. He generated a little bit of buzz in the spring, but certainly not, to equal, say Aiden Hutchinson, equal to Josh Metellus, equal to some of these, to Jonathan Jeter. It feels like it was still a pretty significant competition to see who the starter was opposite Lavert Hill. I think if he is a guy that they were counting on, if in the very least in a nickelback situation. You said the first 2 games they got a bye. Obviously you're playing at Wisconsin in week 4, but you have Rutgers in week 5. My goal, if I was Michigan, was to have him ready to go by homecoming against Iowa the first weekend of October. Mm-hmm. I think that is probably the most realistic, based off of everything that I've heard about it. You say, hey, just put 10, 15 pounds back on the guy. But I mean, look at his where he was through his first 2 seasons. This is not a guy that gains 10 or 15 pounds like the snap of a finger. Some guys have got a build that, that unfortunately, I mean, I can name you a handful of players that never were able to get bigger and stronger during their Michigan careers, and they kind of just petered out. Sure. In fact, we had Devin Gardner on the show last Thursday, and he was talking about some of those guys that he played with. There's a defensive back from Cass Tech. I forget his name now. I think it was Delonte Hallowell. There was another Cass Tech defensive back who he mentioned. He said, my God, the guy was 165 pounds when he came as a freshman, and he was like 170 pounds when he left as a senior, and he could just never put on weight. So that's what concerns me, is Ambry Thomas has seemingly been a guy who struggles putting on the weight. So if he's lost weight with some type of illness, and you're saying, hey, he's got, I just don't know how doable that is.
What was your take on Harbaugh embracing the expectations? He was asked about, it's the first time since 2012 that the writers did not vote Ohio State to first place in the conference or their division, and that was Michigan in 2012, the year after they went 11-2 and brought back Denard Robinson and a lot of those players, and then Ohio State ended up going 11-0 that year in Urban Meyer's first season. But it's the first time since then that the Buckeyes were not picked. Michigan was picked instead, and Jimmy seems to be embracing those expectations and saying, yeah, that's where I'd pick us as well. What's your take on that?
Good. I'm glad he does. I've heard this argument about, I would prefer to have Michigan be the underdog and be, gunning for someone as opposed to be, gunned after. And I don't think it makes that big of a difference, honestly. I mean, Michigan's going to get a team's best shot. If they don't think that Rutgers is going to come at them with everything they've got, if they don't think Illinois is coming at them with everything they got, they're kidding themselves. But they should know better. And I don't think it makes a difference. I think what it says is that the rest of the Big Ten recognizes what a lot of us locally are recognizing, that Michigan looks like the most complete team in the Big Ten right now. They have the best quarterback. They have an offense that should be a juggernaut. Certainly they've lost quite a bit defensively, but they've got a lot of pieces coming back. They've got a favorable home schedule with their three big rivals all coming to the Big House. Why not embrace it? Why not say this is the expectation, and anything less than that is not good enough? In fact, Jim Harbaugh has said that a couple of times throughout his first couple of years, and that's where we are as fans. That's where as fans, that's where I am as a sports talk media show host is look, I mean, here we are. I don't want to say it's because of year 5, but right now everything is coming up Michigan's way in the preseason, and this has got to be the year. This has got to be the year. And if it's not, we're going to have an interesting conversation come December and January.
What's your take on the running back situation? Harbaugh mentioned True Wilson right now is the number 1 guy. They like Christian Turner a lot. It just seems like every time they turn to him to put him in, he keeps getting hurt. You have Zach Charbonnet, who had the meniscus issue with his knee, maybe the most decorated recruit in the incoming 2019 class, other than Daxton Hill. But a lot he was an early enrollee, but was rehabbing that knee, so he didn't play at all. Coach said that he had heard great things about how he looked in off-season workouts. You have Hassan Haskins there, who was kind of a flyer recruit towards the end of the 2018 cycle, but there has been some talk that he's underrated athletically. So, and you have Ben Van Sumeren, who moved over there now that the fullback position is essentially phased out. What's your take on that spot? Given the offensive line they have, there's going to be holes to run through, particularly when you're spreading a defense out.
I mean, that's the best news for the Michigan running back room, is that they have such an experienced, talented offensive line in front of them. And so they might be able to take a guy who's a 600-yard runner and turn him into an 800-yard runner, and an 800-yard runner and turn him into a 1,000-yard runner. That's a positive there. But let me ask you a question, Steve. Have you ever heard a coach mention one of your most important senior players, a guy in Khalid Hudson, and say, yeah, he's got some running back experience, and you never know, we might need him over there. We might need Jordan Anthony, who is a third-year linebacker. We might need him over there, but don't worry about it. We're not worried. We're not concerned. Then why the hell did you bring those two guys' names into the equation?
I think, no, I've never heard it, okay, but I also think you're dealing with a coach that has a mind that is working at 9,000 miles an hour constantly.
Yeah.
And so when he takes it off of lockdown and he starts talking to you for real, as opposed to the glares and the grunts that you guys up there in Ann Arbor normally get every week. All right, so when he starts talking to you regularly, and his dad's not helping him guide the conversation like on the podcast, where he can kind of riff off of him, he's a guy that he is literally verbalizing the mental math he's doing in his head in real time, and that's why he's got 4 different angles and brings things up you didn't even ask him about, and I think that has something to do with it. It also could be he's got a bit of a very dry sense of humor at the exact same time. They're not gonna if we're not gonna see Khalid Hudson playing at running back. I think we all know that, right?
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, we better not. No, I think the one, if that was not a little bit just going like, what? Like, what are we talking about here? Then the part that actually concerned me was when Jim Harbaugh mentioned Christian Turner, who, you're in some order, your top 3, at least most people believe, is True Wilson, Zach Charbonnet, and Christian Turner. Those are 3 guys vying to be the number 1 or the number 1 and the number 2. When Jim Harbaugh says, Christian Turner's a guy who every time we got excited about him and we're ready to throw him into the fire, well, he had a broken hand and we had to sit him out for a little bit. Oh, he came back. We're excited. Oh, he had an ankle injury. We got to sit him for a little bit. Hey, we get him back. We're excited in the spring. Want to see what he can do. Oh, he gets a hamstring injury. Carlos Brown and Justin Fargas and players along the way have been guys who, for whatever reason, have been injury prone. It's no fault of their own. I don't know what it is about it, but they never realized their potential because of that. For him to mention 3 fairly significant injuries over a 9-month span with one player, to me that was a little concerning, because you're counting on this guy to be in the mix. On the flip side, He was very effusive in his praise of Zach Charbonnet, and he was extremely excited about Ben Van Sumeren. If you hear the interview, if you read his comments, and Jim Harbaugh is one of those guys that you talk about what goes on in his head. When Jim Harbaugh gushes about a player, that is a player to keep an eye on. And I remember his very first year, he gushed 3 weeks into the season about J.U. Chesson. And I thought to myself, J.U. Chesson, who has 4 or 5 catches in the first 3 weeks of the season, like what are we getting excited about J.U. Chesson for? And then we get to midway through point in the year, and he finds some chemistry with Jake Rudock, and J.U. Chesson goes on one of the greatest 6-game runs in the history of any wide receiver at Michigan. Putting up gigantic numbers. And I thought, when Harbaugh really goes out of his way to talk about a player, so I think right now, I think Ben Van Sumeren is in this mix. I think Zach Charbonnet is in this mix. I think Drew Wilson's in this mix, and then this Christian Turner, is he a healthy player throughout the entire fall camp? If he's not, that's going to be disappointing. So concern level for running backs, about as high as it's been since Chris Evans was ruled ineligible for the entire season. It's like a 6. It's like a 6. It's not a 10. I'm not in panic mode. I'm not hitting the red button. But I've got a lot to see here in the first couple of weeks.
Final question, Michael. Football related, what do you think was the news that came out last week that didn't get enough attention, or at least maybe stuff that you're even hearing there locally in the aftermath with camps getting ready to start next week?
Honestly, we talked a little bit about on the radio show on Tuesday. Is this battle? Is the offensive line? I don't want to say depth, but the fact that Jim Harbaugh was talking about how much they like Jalen Mayfield, how much they like Andrew Stueber, and when he threw out the idea that John Runyon Jr., an All Big Ten first-team performer at left tackle, could be in a position where he gets moved inside because they like Mayfield and Stueber as their 2 tackles. To me, that was a tremendous sign about how far this offensive line has come along and how high its ceiling is in the coming season. Because, this is like taking David Boss and some of those players and moving an All Big Ten performer. But the reason you moved those All Big Ten performers in previous years was because you had this gigantic need at center. You had a gigantic need at guard. This is talking about moving an All Big Ten performer for luxury reasons, because you might have better players at tackle than your starting left tackle from a year ago. That's such a great sign of where Michigan football is at and where it's headed along the offensive line. And I've said repeatedly, I think Runyon is better suited for inside, and I believe Ed Warner has said
that's probably his NFL future is inside. He is not an NFL left tackle. Yeah.
So if you have better left tackles than him, that's a great sign. And if you can put a guy who's a natural inside player inside, that's a great opportunity for John Runyon.
The other thing to think about, too, is if you are already scheming, looking ahead, and we find a way to put Dylan McCaffrey in there so he's got meaningful snaps because he's the starting quarterback next year. Well, Andrew Stueber and Jalen Mayfield are going to be here next year. And you if you want to make them your starting tackles and give them more experience, especially with the way the season starts, those first 2 games, I think that makes some sense too, and I think it could be a benefit to John Runyon Jr. because, again, I don't think he's an NFL left tackle. I think he might be an NFL right tackle, but I think he has long-term potential in the NFL playing inside, and I think that's probably what Ed Warner was talking about.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think this is if you have those 2 guys start at tackle, you really have what you want out of any offensive line, out of any position group entirely, is you have enough players with experience that are coming back the following season, especially at the 2 tackle spots. If Runyon starts, and if he does, that's great. But if he were to start inside, you essentially have 2 starters as seniors, Bredesen at left guard, and either Onwenu or Runyon at right guard, and you'd have 3 guys, Cesar Ruiz, Andrew Stueber, and Jalen Mayfield, that all have eligibility in 2020. And, that's like what you want. You want to have probably 3 guys that have eligibility the following season to be able to bridge that gap and just keep on repeating that process. It doesn't always work out that way. Sometimes you got to lose 4 starters. Sometimes, you never want, if you lose 5, God help you. But that's a perfect scenario for Michigan here going forward.
And there's one other quick angle to this too. If you're going to run 10, 15, 20 more plays per game that he did last year, and everybody's raving about Michael Onwenu, how much better shape and stuff he's in. But now you're in a position where if you can give him a blow. I mean, he can sit out a series. You kick Runyon inside. You bring Stuber and/or Mayfield, depending on who the other guy is, to take his spot at tackle. And now you have almost like a substitution pattern as well to make sure you're fresh up there up front. That's another aspect about this to consider too, given the offensive switch. Michael, great stuff. Always good to talk to you. Thanks for joining us this week on Michigan Podcast, man. Take care.
Thanks for having me, guys.
Hey, if you want to keep up with what we think about Michigan athletics all week long in between episodes of Michigan Podcast, check out our website at wolverinedigest.com. For example, we've got a brand new story up there looking at all of the potential starting fives in the Big Ten now that Franz Wagner's in the fold for the Wolverines, and you can see where Michigan stacks up against the rest of the conference. There's ways to keep up with our coverage of the football team, basketball. We've added hockey and baseball as well. So a ton of stuff that you can follow along with here. And we have a video each and every morning we put up as a way of just saying kind of good morning and catching you up on whatever the big news was from overnight for the Michigan Wolverines. So you can follow us on the website, recruiting too, at wolverinedigest.com. This week's Twitter poll results, we asked you about what we were discussing with Michael Spath a little bit earlier in this episode. What do you think about Harbaugh saying both Shea Patterson and Dylan McCaffrey will play quarterback this season? 33% of you say you love it. 17% said you hate it. 50% said, I think we kind of need to see how it looks first before giving an opinion, which I happen to think is the correct opinion up there on that list. Which brings us to this week's question of the week from Trey, who says, am I allowed to be a Michigan fan? I never went to the school, but I've been a fan since Tom Brady's days, back when I was 5. In general, Trey, I don't give a turd with corns in it what people tell me I am allowed and not allowed to do that isn't some kind of like moral law. I don't care, particularly when they use social media to tell me those things. They can take a long walk off a short cliff. And most Michigan fans didn't go to the school. I mean, it has the largest living alumni body in the planet, them or Penn State, depending on the year. But you don't sell out a 110,000 seat stadium every year since 1975 because only alumni are in there. All right. So it's a free country. If you love the maize and blue since you were a kid, muy bien. I didn't go to Michigan. I couldn't get in. I wasn't academically qualified. My math scores on my ACT and my transcript were too low. They wouldn't admit me. But, I've loved Michigan since I was about 10 when we moved to Michigan in the state, or we moved to the state of Michigan when I was 10 years old back in 1983. I've loved the Wolverines ever since. So, yeah, this is it's sports, man. It's not a political party or a church or, an army. It's just sports. If you like the team, like it. We've already thought too much about it. People take this stuff too seriously. And anybody that even threatens you with something like that isn't worth dignifying with an answer. Thank you for tuning in here this week for Michigan Podcast, a bit of an ornerier than normal episode. Want to thank our friends at Detroit Sports Podcast for helping get the word out about what we do here each week at Michigan Podcast. Don't forget you can follow us all week long on Twitter at Michigan Podcast and keep up with all of the content we generate each day at wolverinedigest.com. That's wolverinedigest.com. One final thing. If you're watching on YouTube or listening via the podcast platform of your choice, if you'd give us a like, subscribe, 5-star review as it is appropriate, given the various platforms, we would greatly appreciate that. The more of you that do that, the better it is we find more Michigan fans just like you. The number one piece of feedback we've gotten since we launched this 2 years ago is, why don't you guys get more views? I mean, this is really good. Why don't we hear more about this? Well, that's where you guys can help us. All right, help us get the word out. So share, like, subscribe, link, etc. And thank you to all of you that have done that already. We'll be back again next week. Until then, go Blue.